Hello then, welcome to The World Today on Channels Television. I'm Cynthia Are. Here are our top stories. Now, is it possible that the United States might have underestimated the power of the Islamic State militants? Well, that might be the case, but for now, Iraqi ground forces backed by airstrikes appear to have halted the advancing ISIS militants in a town west of Baghdad. The airstrikes followed clashes with ISIS, who've been making gains towards the capital, targeting Amaria al-Fallujah, which is 40 kilometers from Baghdad and a key strategic town.
As the fight against the Islamic State militants continues, Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan said on Sunday that his country will contribute to the fight, but stopped short of saying in what capacity Turkey will take part.
Where will we stand as Turkey? We will hold talks with our institutions this week and liaise on the situation, and we'll take the stance that we should. We'll definitely give our support. We can't remain out of this.
Speaking at a conference in Istanbul alongside the founder of the World Economic Forum, Erdogan also said the struggle against Islamic State militants should go beyond airstrikes.
It cannot be limited to Iraq or Syria, because we have to wage a common fight against terrorism. If we cannot do that, the measures you would take against terrorists will be temporary, and it will be limited to a region. And this can be done by airstrikes only. There should be ground operations as well.
Clashes between Kurdish fighters and Islamic State insurgents continued in the northern Syrian town of Kobani. Kurdish fighters positioned on a hill near Seftik village, around 10 kilometers away from Kobani, were seen firing at IS positions with heavy machine guns. Meanwhile, loud explosions were heard and smoke was seen rising from buildings in Kobani town. U.S. airstrikes hit IS targets near Kobani in the militant group's heartland of Raqqa, and on Saturday, September the 27th, sites to the east of the town were also targeted. But the heavily armed Sunni insurgents appeared to be gradually forcing the Kurdish fighters back around Kobani, raising fears that the town may fall. Aid workers say the tens of thousands of refugees who have crossed the border to Turkey in recent days may be there for an extended period. Despite the fact that the US-led coalition has carried out hundreds of airstrikes, Middle Eastern analysts doubt that it has had much of an effect. Here in Jordan, more and more people are voting no to airstrikes. Analysts believe Jordan has become a political tool for the U.S., which allows them to fly over Jordan.
Americans and the foreign forces to attack an Arab land, to attack an Arab country under the guise of attacking Daesh, and to use the same, and it is as if they are saying Arabs are doing it to the Arabs and not us.
The United Nations, which has warned that as many as 400,000 people could flee Kobani to Turkey, has said that the number of displaced makes the influx from the besieged border town the most serious yet of Syria's civil war. The advance towards Kobani is the latest in a series of lighting campaigns by the Islamist group, which have seen them seize swathes of territory in both Syria and Iraq.
For more on the ISIS threat, I'm now being joined live from Washington by the Voice of America's Cal Perry. Cal, thank you so much for joining us on The World Today. Now, I'd like to start by asking you, Middle Eastern analysts have rendered or deemed the airstrikes being by the US-led coalition ineffective. What's your stance on that?
Well, I think analysts are really looking at this obviously from afar. There's nobody there on the ground. And so what you see when you look at this from the United States, from Washington, D.C., is you see this Islamic army continuing to make their moves forward. You see them continuing to take more and more geographical land. This is something that we heard from President Barack Obama yesterday, saying that they're just taking swaths of land both in Syria and Iraq, where basically the Iraqi army is no longer there. So it's really unchallenged territory. So from that that perspective, the airstrikes don't seem to be working. The advance seems to be continuing. Now, if you speak to people inside the Pentagon, they'll tell you that they're really going after some of the command and control structures, some of the warehouses that the Islamic fighters have. But you're right, these analysts are taking a look at the big picture, and they're not seeing a big difference.
Now, based on you just saying that the analysts are right, do you think we're going to see a situation of boots on ground, either from the United States or its allies, in order to get better results?
You know, I think it's important that we note that the U.S. already has boots on the ground. There's 160 military advisors, is what they're called at the Pentagon. Now, these are folks who are on the ground. They are with special forces by and large, and these are mostly American special force units, small units. A large majority of them are Green Berets, I'm told by somebody over at the Pentagon, and they're looking at what's happening on the ground. Will we see a large force of American troops? We won't. This is a country, the United States, that is war-weary. It has been through 2 wars in the past 10 years. Certainly not something that the American public is going to be able to really have the stomach for. But sooner or later, there will have to be some kind of force on the ground that people can rely on. Right now, it certainly does not seem as though the Iraqi army is up to the task.
Now, in an interview very recent, we understand that President Barack Obama said that the United States actually underestimated the Islamic State. Is this a sign that the United States might be possibly overwhelmed to some extent?
I think it's a sign that the American public especially was shocked by a lot of the images that they've been seeing coming out of the region, these beheadings. This is something that I think many people hoped was a thing of the past, a hangover of the early days of the Iraq War. But the ability that this Islamic army has to take to social media, to get their message out sometimes faster than governments around the world, I think that that's really, in some ways, at least publicly, leveled the playing field, made it very difficult for governments like the United States, governments in the United Kingdom, for example, to keep control of the situation. We see this group's ability to penetrate to groups of young people across America, across the United Kingdom. We're seeing a real problem in London, where the United Kingdom is worried about its citizens traveling to Syria and then returning. And all of this, it seems as though, has really started on social media. I think that's really where the U.S. government was caught by surprise.
I really appreciate you spending time with us on The World Today. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us concerning the Islamic State threat. I've been speaking to the Voice of America's Cal Perry, and he's been telling us more about the Islamic State militants, and he's been talking to us from Washington. Thank you so much. Now, in other news, say what you like, but we'll do what we want. That's the message tens of thousands of pro-democracy protesters are sending as they continue to block Hong Kong streets, shutting down its business hub and ignoring appeals to leave. The demonstrations have spread to other areas, including a shopping district and a residential area. China has warned other countries not to support the illegal rallies.
Hong Kong police strongly condemned violent acts carried out by some protesters and urged the thousands of pro-democracy demonstrators currently gathered on the streets of the territory to return home in an attempt to defuse the continuing standoff that represents one of the biggest political challenges since the Tiananmen Square crackdown 25 years ago. But those condemnations and appeals fell on deaf ears.
I think maybe police will fight us, and then we don't to fight our police, because we should not to use our hands to protect our Hong Kong and our future. Yes.
My friend from the news, from my heart, yeah. Everything is calling me to come here to protest Hong Kong, to tell the Hong Kong government what we need. What we need actually, not the fake election. We need a real democratic election.
The unrest, the worst in Hong Kong since China resumed its rule over the former British colony in 1997, sent white clouds of gas wafting among some of the world's most valuable office towers and shopping malls before riot police suddenly withdrew around lunchtime on Monday after 3 nights of confrontation. Some protesters put up barricades to block security forces early on Monday, although a relative calm descended after dawn. By mid-afternoon, hundreds of protesters were seen streaming again into downtown areas of Hong Kong. A bus draped with a banner reading "Democracy" was parked haphazardly across the main road. Only hours later, police had baton-charged a crowd blocking a road into the main government district in defiance of official warnings that the demonstrations were illegal, though Chiang denied the police had used excessive force. The one country, two systems formula guarantees Hong Kong a high degree of autonomy and freedoms not enjoyed in mainland China, with universal suffrage set as an eventual goal. However, Beijing last month rejected demands for people to freely choose the city's next leader, prompting threats from activists to shut down the central business district. China wants to limit 2017 elections to a handful of candidates loyal to Beijing. Communist Party leaders worry that calls for democracy could spread to cities on the mainland.
Now, speaking of protests, more than 150 protesters gathered near the Ferguson Police Department yesterday evening to demand the arrest of Darren Wilson, the officer who fatally shot and killed unarmed teenager Michael Brown on August the 9th. While protests continued over the shooting death of the teenager by Wilson, who is white, police were seeking suspects on Sunday in what appeared to be the unrelated shootings of 2 police officers in and near the Missouri city of Ferguson. However, no arrests have been made in the shootings of those 2 officers. Ferguson has seen weeks of sometimes violent demonstrations following Michael Brown's death. Now, unfortunately, Mother Nature manifested her ability in Peru, where at least 8 people have died in an earthquake in the southern part of the country. The 4.9 magnitude quake hit the Cusco region in the early hours of the morning, and the worst affected was the remote Andean village of Misca, where 45 homes collapsed, killing 4 children and 4 adults. As a result of the events, the authorities have declared a state of emergency, and President Ollanta Humala has said his government will help rebuild the village. We'll take a break now in the world today. When we come back, we'll give you the latest update concerning the United Nations General Meeting. Please